Hello, welcome to our last session of the day. So welcome to everyone in person and everyone online. As always, two small organizational details. Please do not stand in the corridor. We need it clear for safety reasons. And there will be, as always, a Q&A at the end of the session. And you should submit your questions through the inventory app. And so I am pleased to welcome you all to the panel on the topic, are we optimizing for our goals, strategic alignment in animal advocacy? The panel will be hosted by Tobias Leenaert. Tobias is an author of the book How to Create a Vegan World, a Pragmatic Approach, which has been translated to 14 different languages. Tobias is also a lifelong speaker and strategist, a co-founder of ProVeg International and ProVeg Belgium. He is keen on thinking out of the box, building bridges, and thinking slowly. He has been vegan for over 25 years, and currently he lives in Belgium with his partner and many rescued animals. So, Tobias, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for sticking it out here so late with us for the panel with the sexiest title of the conference. Are we optimizing for a goal, strategic alignment in animal advocacy? All right. So gonna ask the panelists to introduce themselves in at most 1 minute each. So we can start with you, Olga.
Hi, I'm Olga Kiku. I'm the director of a new organization called Animal Advocacy and Food Transition. I'm based in Athens, Greece, and I work at EU level, mostly in Brussels.
I'm Ben. I'm one of the co-directors of Animal Rising, and we run some of the biggest direct action campaigns anywhere in the world and design some of the biggest social movement organizing systems in the climate and animal space in Europe. And now we're fighting, well, we're doing different things, but fighting factory farming in the UK and spun off a load of other organizations too.
I'm Jaya. I'm the co-founder of Global Food Partners. We help create a cage-free ecosystem in emerging markets focused on Asia, helping farmers to transition from cage to cage-free farming and helping companies source and fulfill their commitment for cage-free.
Didn't you want us to introduce ourselves first?
No, just who you are and who you work for is fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm Connor. I'm from Anima International. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the UK chapter known as Open Cages. I can talk more about what we do later.
Later, yes. Yeah. And now we can come back to here with you, Connor. I'd like to ask you to just mention your the ultimate dream that you have. I mean, regarding animals.
Yeah. I'm not really sure. I think that it sounds like a joke, but my position is basically that suffering is bad, and I think happiness is good, and I want to have as little suffering in the world as possible for all sentient beings, and the opposite with happiness, have as much of it as possible. Animals are suffering a lot, and I would like to end it.
All right.
I have nothing to add. I think I literally reflect what he said. Pain and suffering is a bad thing, and want to ensure a world where there isn't suffering and more happiness. More so, I think specifically my life's goal would be, as developing nations reap their equity in growth, they're able to have animal welfare as part of their food security as they grow. I think like that would be my near-term vision, but obviously pain and suffering.
End animal farming or end suffering, whatever. I'm not that interested until it becomes relevant to actually decision making, but something of that type, end suffering, end animal farming, either is fine.
Yeah, I will also say suffering, or ending animal exploitation, but also I would like to highlight how what we do to animals and what we do to humans and what we do to the environment can also be interconnected. And we are talking about violence here. So violence to our brothers and sisters, violence to our other species that we live in this planet with, and violence to the destroying the environment and our habitat. I would like to highlight this more through my work, and also for people to be more aware of this and connect everything.
Okay. Thank you very much. So ending animal suffering or exploitation is a pretty big dream and big goal. I'd like to hear from you all, like how that translates to your work or to the vision or the main goal of your work more concretely in your organization. And now we go back again like that.
Okay. Well, I think one common point that we have with, if you go outside the animal advocacy sphere, you find that we agree with a lot of people on ending factory farming, ending industrial animal agriculture. And sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of times, when you join forces with others, you're stronger. So bring other people to the movement. I think this common cause is something that can bring others, and I've seen it with my own eyes in the last few years. There are more and more people from the environmental movement, from consumers' angles, from public health, etc., who have become very aware and now have embraced this in their campaigns. So I think realistically, this is something that we can strive for.
Thank you. What was the question? What are we doing? So is that the question?
Yeah, like the ambition of reducing suffering, how does that translate more concretely to the aims or the big objective of your organization?
Yeah. So most organizations, talk slowly, I wrote there, have got to the stage where they're over-optimizing for short-term material wins. But the other way we evaluate what we're doing is the capacity and movement building, the thing that makes you to be able to do tomorrow what you can't do today. And that's what our origins were from Extinction Rebellion. We have changed so many times, and we've re-strategized so many times. But the basic problem we're trying to solve is how can we be 100 or 1,000 times stronger tomorrow than we are today. So in the UK, for example, we're building a system to fight factory farming, and it's built around a couple of components. Number one, we're doing the world's biggest farm investigation. We're investigating 200 pig farms out of 250, which is 80% of the pig farms in the UK, by building a volunteer system. So there's 100 volunteers trained up. That in itself is part of the goal, the personal transformation for people involved. And number two, we're fighting every single planning application in the country, where we've built a system where we've won 100% of the time so far to stop new factory farms being built in the UK. And number three, we've created a new organisation called Lawyers for Animals to scale up the legal capacity of the animal movement, to do the larger scale private prosecutions off the back of the factory farms. And there's one or two other bits, but the point is, I guess we try and play to win. And there's like obviously inherent optimism in that. I'm going to just stop talking there because that's enough for now.
Okay, so building capacity for you is one of the main goals, actually. Yeah, Jay.
Yeah, thanks. So we believe that, and for most people in this room, animal welfare is priceless, like the opportunity for the bird to spread her wings, lay eggs in a nest box. But from a commercial point of view, it has a price, and for it to be viable, a business has to be willing to pay that price. Currently, the market mechanisms, at least in the developing world, that the price is too much, and the cost to ignore animal welfare is way lower than the cost to actually pay to implement animal welfare within their systems. So at Global Food Partners, we are creating an ecosystem where we work with farmers for a successful transition to make animal welfare profitable as well as economically viable. we have systems where companies can fulfill their animal welfare commitment with least friction with an offset scheme, which can then transition into a physical supply chain. So we believe that for what is priceless to us needs to be priced for scale. And we just create that ecosystem for the farmers who finally need to get the benefit for the change to happen on farm. So that's what Global Food Partners does. In real terms, what we do is build capacity of farmers. We have model farms and training centers in India, China, and Indonesia, where we train farmers to transition from cage to cage-free. We offer an offset system called cage-free credits or impact incentives, where companies can buy these credits to just offset their use of caged eggs within the region. We also connect farmers with existing buyers so that they're able to develop and supply physical eggs and a lot of other ecosystem building work like seeding associations of cage-free farmers, ensuring that there's like traceability legislation. Overall, the end goal really is that if there is a price to pay for animal welfare, can we make that price really low so that companies are able to pay and increase animal welfare?
Yeah, so Anima is quite broad in what it does. So the stated goal is to create a world free from animal suffering, and we're pretty agnostic about how we do that. So we do quite a few different things, and it's just about recognizing that we have limited time and resources. So what's the way that we can reduce the most suffering with the resources that we have? So it means that we do various things depending on the context. Operated in 6 different countries. But yeah, because we're generally agnostic with the interventions, we do direct campaigning, we do movement building. So for example, in like Central Asia, we're doing movement building where there's not much of well, the animal rights movement is quite new. That includes capacity building, so fundraising, making sure we have a strong organization for the long term. But we are mostly doing direct campaigning, and we are, for example, trying to ban fur farming in Poland, working on dairy cow welfare in Bulgaria. But mostly, I think most of our resources go into corporate campaigns. So corporate welfare campaigns is sort of the main thing that we do, because it seems to us to be by far the most tractable way to reduce animal suffering, at least for farmed animals. And mostly we work on cage-free campaigns and the European chicken commitment. Just so in case you don't know, European chicken commitment is about improving the welfare of chickens raised for meat.
Thank you. So you've already gone into strategies and tactics a little bit. I'd like to hear from you if you can name 1 or 2 global metrics or indicators for your work by which you would measure if you're successful or not. What would you name? Whoever wants to start.
After you.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of ways you can measure it. A number of people involved. Obviously, the end goal. There's the easy things to measure. I think the point is there's some really easy things to measure. How many animals have been kept out of factory farms? How many? I think people often optimize for the things which are easy to measure. For example, like welfare. I mean, it's such a strange coincidence. So, like a lot of the things that we optimize for are also really easy to measure. That would be like so lucky if that was just. What do we optimize for? Actually, I'm just going to stop answering this question. I've run out of steam. I'll have a think.
There was a strong claim there, and we can get into it later. Yeah. So our goal is to end animal suffering. So suffering reduced is the metric, basically. And how? Yeah,
a bit more concrete.
Yeah. So I think it's quite hard to measure suffering, but we can try. The Welfare Footprint Institute does very cool work on this, trying to quantify suffering. And they use some models around duration of suffering, trying to work out, for example, with broiler chickens and caged hens, how much time do they spend in different types of pain. Again, it's very speculative, but it's a place to start. And that can kind of give you an indication of how to prioritize different interventions. And so we're not doing this as rigorously as we want to. We're trying to improve on this. But we are starting to be quite rigorous about trying to have some assessment of how much suffering we can actually affect. My dream for this would be that we, as a movement, take on a suffering footprint thing, like carbon footprint. So just have a metric like that we can use. Again, I know it's not perfect, but I think that we need to make sure that we need to try as hard as we can to hold ourselves accountable, basically, right? Rather than just sort of generally feeling like we're having impact. I think we need to have some way of holding ourselves to account for our stated goals.
Yeah.
At policy level, one way to think about this is how many animals can you get out of the food system? Of course, we're not there yet because things are not going so well globally, but the numbers are increasing. So ideally, we would be counting animals out of the system. Now, at
a
reduction
of the number of animals.
Yes, that would be yes, that would be. Of course, also we want those who are still in it to suffer less, but I think the numbers count in this case. However, I mean, we're not there. We're not there. And actually, if we worked for a company, let's say, and we couldn't achieve anything all these years that we have worked for, we would be out of the company because we're not delivering. I mean, the numbers are going up, not going down. So, however, I mean, we are proceeding with specific asks that will, in effect, change the lives of many animals. And, many of you here know about the KJ GCI, and that it has the potential to basically ban cages in Europe, and that will also resonate in the rest of the world eventually. We're not there yet because lots have happened in the last couple of years, and this has not. We're not even close yet. We'll see what happens next year, but ideally that could be also something that we could use as a metric. Now, this is at policy level, though. At the same time, we can also use other metrics to see, for example, how much support you have at campaign level and how much awareness there is in Europe. I'm talking about Europe, and I know I'm not referring to the rest of the world, but this is like my example. So we have, we know that there's really high awareness about animal welfare, and if we call it that way, or animal protection, and we can use the Eurobarometer studies which show that the overwhelming majority of individuals, usually call for better measures for animals and usually want the EU to implement high welfare and protection of animals through via the rules. But a lot of times what the Eurobarometers show regarding how individuals think, this is one story, but the other story is that in reality it's quite different. So, and we don't need to. We all know how hard it is.
I've got my mind straight.
Okay.
So we don't think of ourselves as we're an organisation optimised for an intervention to receive for one output. We would do a movement level analysis, but what impact are we having on the system from a movement level analysis? So we're in the interest. What we're optimising for is power building, and that requires complexity and a much more nuanced understanding. It also requires being open for much more uncertainty. So if you're interacting with a complex environment, you can be following an odor loop. So you're acting, you're learning, you're reorientating, and so it's just much more complex. So you could be looking at things. So people, I'll give one example, sometimes conclude that the movement is somehow losing or is weaker because it hasn't got a load of better chicken commitments recently. But if you were to look at if you were to do an analysis of the power of the movement now, the infrastructure of the conferences, all of this has been built in the last 5 years. It's like new, more diverse funders have come in. The conferences infrastructure has been built on our key issues like factory farming. There's 90% of public opinion. There's this momentum. If you look at the movement, most people in senior positions of leadership, not everyone, are well suited for their role. So these sorts of factors, which are much more complex, are much harder. The question, of course, over-optimization stifles that there's an inherent inefficiency in complexity, and over-optimization just for impact, means you just eventually let other parts of the system collapse. So we're seeing this already with welfare organizations. So every welfare organization around, not so much Anima, particularly though American organizations, big up Anima, and I love welfare campaigns, but can no longer find any more campaigners. They're all going, where do we get the campaigner from? Where do we get the campaigner from? I'm like you don't just get them, you create them, man. And so that's because they completely over-optimized for corporate campaigns, forgot about power and movement building, and their tail was eating them. And in fact, the animal welfare movement in the US is now having to steal from the fur campaigns. Well, not steal, but they've had to. ICOR, which is running welfare campaigns now around the world with a bit of a can-do attitude, is getting it from. It literally no longer existed in the animal welfare space, so it's had to integrate with the cluster from the fur movement. Sorry, I might be getting it.
If you had one metric, you have a fan there, Ben. If you had one metric, like if you talk about like power building, like can you make that a little bit more concrete? Like what kind of type of person you want to see in which position? You want X amount of activists, people in politics. How do you define, or what's the best way to create that power?
Well, you have to be a little bit more comfortable with unknowns than if you're doing just optimizing for impact. But well, because anyone who's got a largest volunteer system, people look at us and just think. I think many people who don't know how to do it look at people who've got like hundreds or thousands. I'm going to give you an example. Extinction Rebellion. So we come from Extinction Rebellion. Up until this point, basically there were like no climate activists, really. There were a few crusty campaigns in the UK. And eventually they cracked the model, and it was optimized for human connection of small groups. So they give a mobilization talk, inspire people, put them in a small group where they feel love, where they feel trust, where they feel meaning, where they feel seen, where they feel valued, and they have a shared purpose. And people really overestimate that how these small little details, and its mobilization is about micro design and discipline when you're dealing with small groups and systematizing that, and where people feel connected to each other. So I guess when you get cold-hearted, at that point, Extinction Rebellion, the number they're optimizing for is number of people who've signed up to be arrested. But we might be optimizing for the number of universities, for our plant-based universities campaign. Once we're in the mobilization game, it's how many university students have attended a launch training and gone on to run a campaign. So it depends what you're optimizing for. Okay. So it's not as simple as, of course, the end product, and this is what, is reduce animal suffering, but the metrics you're optimizing for your power building depend on what is your social movement system that you built, optimize it. What is it building around? And it could be a plant-based universities campaign. It could be how many local residents are actually fighting local planning applications. It could be how many people are attending fur protests. So it's just a much more complex analysis, and it attracts very complex people.
All right, thank you.
Can I quickly say something about this? I think there's maybe like some things getting mixed up here, because like the goal can be, like the thing that you hold yourself accountable to is like reducing animal suffering, right? Like that's the number. But the answer to that might be movement building, right? Like the answer to how do we have more impact might be we need to be a stronger movement, right? It's just a decision-making tool, right? And I think the problem is that we're so far removed from the problem. It's so abstract that it's very easy to make mistakes. Like we don't know, we need to, well, this has been my opinion, that we have to be rigorous about making sure that we are making the best decisions we can, right? And so that requires some rigor, right? Rather than having like all of these like different sort of like strategies, which might make sense, but my point would be that we'd have to talk about it and make sure that those things are actually in service of the mission, right?
Yeah. On the other hand, like I read your calculation that Tobias made about the effectiveness and the price of reducing suffering in the case of Anima's campaigns, and it was very interesting, but it was full of uncertainty, I would say. So it can be rigorous, but really uncertain.
Sure, yeah, and that's what I said earlier, right? Like I think we have to start somewhere. Like, you know, with the climate movement, for example, it seems like very useful to have things to hold ourselves to, like We can tell governments to have targets for how much carbon to reduce, for example. We need to start somewhere. And like maybe some of the work that needs to be done is more research into how to measure these things, right? It's not an excuse to not try and be rigorous.
Mm-hmm. Jaya?
Yeah, I think, speaking of that, I think we are not abstract at all. We measure on the total number of companies fulfilling their commitments in the global south. So I think we've set our goals that 50% of companies who have global commitments, who operate in Asia, at least meet 50% of their commitment. So it kind of just helps push their animal welfare forward. Obviously, we want them to meet 100%, but also realist. The second aspect is we want to see total number of birds out of cages and also increase in overall cage-free farming and that ecosystem being built. So when a farmer does make a decision to transform their barn from cage farming to cage-free farming, they have all the necessary ecosystem that's required for change. So, and where we come from, it's really not abstract at all. Like we quantify saying that, okay, here are the countries, this is the baseline of the total number of birds in cages. This is the cost currently for a company to transition. Is that reasonable? Is that not reasonable in terms from a company's point of view? If it's not, how are we able to reduce the price? Is the price increased because just in the friction in the supply chain? If it's a friction in the supply chain, what alternatives are we able to provide? And our credit systems is one of that. If it's not a friction in the supply chain, then how do we nudge companies? Because companies are really looking for a reliable supply chain, a resilient supply chain, and a reasonable supply chain. And for us, success means if a company in Asia or any other emerging market wants to go cage-free, do they have a reliable supply chain, a resilient supply chain, and someone that they can resonate and provide these cage-free eggs for? And that's really what we optimize for those 3 R's.
Olga?
Just want to say a very short comment that I think it would be really interesting to also look at how our movement is compares with other movements. And whether the growth of our movement, and there you have to put their animal welfare, animal rights, whatever you want to call it, you know, whether this growth matches the growth of other movements about other issues. And do we attract many young people, many new people into the movement? And how many new people, and how many do the others attract? And sometimes it's really hard to quantify these.
What's your intuition?
And also, you need to consider, you know, it depends geographically, it depends at a given political era, at a given time period, etc. So I think it is, it is not something that could be quantifiable easily.
How would you answer your own question? Like, what do you think? What is it, in terms of like how we compare as a movement with other social justice movements of today?
I would like to say that it's the most dynamic movement that exists right now.
Yeah.
I really believe this, but that doesn't mean that I kind of place the other, other struggles. I see other struggles under a different light.
Yeah.
I don't want to put down other,
No,
other
you're
movements,
not doing
but
that.
I do think that we are the most dynamic.
Not the biggest, but the best. Okay. You want to say something?
Yeah, I often hear this dichotomy between having impact and movement capacity building. These have been compartmentalized as, I hear it often, as two separate activities. And it's very, you can do both. You can be serious about impact. We've kept millions of chickens out of factory farms this year. That's got to be a good thing. And but also built into the system is we're just having, this is what complexity involves, is building in movement building capacity into that system. So most of the corporate campaign, they were not designed. So movement building isn't built into the systems for running corporate campaigns. So and it doesn't need to be that way. I send Connor voice notes all the time saying this. I'm just like, people are like, where are the campaigners? And you're just like, wait, do you not have a conveyor belt of campaigners coming through the system? Where do you think they're going to come from? These just aren't two separate activities. This is my point. It's like there's movement building and there's impact. It's like, no. it's just you have to design an integrated system to begin with. And yeah, so sorry, I just wanted to say that. That's like just on mistakes. Mistakes, well, all mistakes are forgivable, including it in the eyes of the animals. The only thing which is not learning from them. and taking high risks, you've got an opportunity to take a high opportunity of a big learning. Yeah, and if you're not learning from it, get out of here. But if you are, and that's so you can optimize for innovation, and within a high innovation, we can't outspend animal farming. I don't know why anyone thinks we can, but we can outsmart them. And to do that, you need to stimulate high innovation environments. So high quality in-person time is important for that. For example, I'm surprised Anima doesn't have an in-person office in Poland, but must be getting some things right. But that would massively help, because the purpose of any innovation that's ever happened anywhere, if you look at I don't know, the Manhattan Project, or literally or Bell Labs in the US that produced all the inventions, it was all high intensity in-person time of a high talent dense team. So there's lots of things that you can do to create like a high innovation environment, and that's what we have to optimize for, because we cannot outspend them.
All right, Connor, are you getting an office now?
I'm convinced.
And
yeah,
I
agree.
mean, saying for you to share we have an office. I mean, inviting you to move into it.
It's like it's 3 hours travel. It's too much. I was going to say something. I've forgotten it.
Okay, did you want to comment? Okay, so yeah, I think if you can see the panelists, then you realize that the organization didn't think of including some staunch abolitionists who is anti-welfare, but still we need to spice it up a bit. So we're going to try to be less agreeable here. Can you think of, and you can talk about your co-panelists or about people or organizations who are not in the room, but can you think of widely used tactics that you think are counterproductive to the things that you have stated that you are doing, that you want to do, and that would detract from achieving your goals?
Generally, I think that tactics are. It depends on the strategy, what a good tactic is. I think there are not really many tactics that are off the table. Obviously, the violence and stuff that happened in the 80s and 90s, groups going too far. But generally, it just depends. But one interesting point of tension is that as Ben said, Anima Rising is doing this thing which we've also been doing in Poland, in Anima, which is trying to block the building of new farms, or applications of new farms, things like that. And a problem that this has is for groups trying to improve welfare, we need more sheds to be built, because you need more space. And this is an obvious point of tension. It's been an issue for us in Poland. And I know that there are, for example, in the UK, in the last couple of years, we've had retailers agree to improve the stocking density of broiler chickens, and to do so, they need to build hundreds more sheds. And this has been very clearly a challenge for them, is that they can't build more sheds, and because local groups are already blocking them. And I think there are solutions to this. So we talk, me and Ben, about this, and others in Anima Rising. But I think maybe it's an example of how, if we're not clear about what we're trying to do, trying to optimize for them and working together, many things like this are going to happen, and it can be very damaging. I'm not worried about it, but I think it's maybe an example of how, as I said earlier, it's very abstract what we're doing, and for most of us, and even with the decisions that we make, we don't know what the counterfactual is. So it's hard to know, it's hard to know that you're making the right decisions. So this is why I'm very. My opinion is that I think we should be quite clear about what it is we're trying to do, and be able, so we can talk about it with each other.
So you are in favor of new farms to be built, so that the same number of animals can have more space, basically. I assume you're not in favor of more farms for more animals.
Generally, if we want to achieve the European chicken commitment, we need more chickens, basically. Because if they want to produce the same amount of chicken meat, they're less efficient. And
you need more. You're going to bring more chickens into the world.
Yeah, and this is the trade-off we have to accept if we want to do it. according to Welfare Footprint Institute, it's still less suffering overall because the improvement is so significant, moving from a fast-growing broiler to a slow-growing broiler, you still reduce overall animal suffering.
But it's not. It's still not a net positive life.
No, not necessarily.
So we're creating more beings that have a net negative life.
Yes, but the overall suffering, which is the thing that I would say matters most, is lower.
All right.
I think two, one on the movement level, I think second on the developed market strategy. I think one is whenever I look at, and I think we saw this in the animal testing world, where like, well, European Union banned vivisection or testing on primates. All that created was primate labs being set up in China, India as CROs. And as I see more and more European organizations saying that, hey, you know what, we're going to get a ban on factory farming, animal farming in the European Union. But it's not the California-style sales ban. So it basically means that you can still sell those eggs from cages. All you're really doing is incentivizing farms to move from one place and go to another jurisdiction where it's even lower regulations than what it is. So in the sense, like, whenever I've seen people say that, hey, I've stopped factory farming in my country, have you really? Or did you just like move to another place? Or the same thing, like, I have stopped primate testing in my country, have you really? Or did you just like get a CRO in India, CRO in China to do the same product testing? And because it's not in my backyard, I feel good about it. So I think that's just kind of see as to how global this whole trade is. Like, when Canadian retailers decided to phase out gestation crates, Canadian farms came to India and they're like massive gestation crate facilities, retrofit built there. So again, we really didn't get rid of those crates, we just replaced them. I think that's on the one aspect of it. The second element is on the international groups. Like KFC in India has 60% vegetarian option. You walk into any McDonald's in Indonesia, they have like a local flavor. But you look at, and again, with all respect to the international organizations, there's like this, well, we have this one global strategy that we are working on and not creating local leaders, not providing enough autonomy for local leaders to take that lead to respond to the needs of that particular country. And this somehow to say that, well, we all need to have this Washington, DC approach to life is problematic. And it's counterintuitive to what every single company and corporations who are successful do it. So I guess two things. One is, let's just focus on, are we really solving for factory farming or do we feel good just replacing it? Second is, are we just happy creating clones of the animal welfare movement as it stands in the US and Europe in different parts of the world? Or do we really want to be creating something that caters to the local need?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I was just going to say a small thing on, obviously imports are like one of the fundamental, we need to put brakes in the system so then we can do system interventions at country level. That's, of course, a priority. Just I was going to say on the fur ban, so when fur got banned in the UK, breeding, it did also make the fur industry start collapsing in the UK. So there is a link. If you ban pig farming in the UK, even if you were still allowed to import it, it would result in pig going down because of a load of other factors. And just on, there's definitely a thing in, I'd say in the effective altruism logic, particularly the impact focus of asking, maybe, I don't know if this is your experience, but I was speaking to, I can't remember your name now, but anyway, in Kazakhstan, they're being treated like they're failing. It's a movement in its very early days. It's blatant that there are going to be no material wins happening in Kazakhstan anytime soon. Forgive me if I'm wrong from our conversation, but what they can do is build the movement and make it stronger. But they're being made to feel insufficient, like they're losers, like they can't achieve anything because it's this analysis of what's the actual impact on the animals, and that was the real Forgive me, but that was really the feeling I was getting, and I do think that's this because it's across the board. Some movements are strong enough in America and Europe. Maybe you're managing to do it in India, but some movements are not at the stage yet to actually start winning. And the absolute laser focus just on impact and not movement building does end up being this like weird sort of like top down. well, everyone's met them, like these arrogant funders who are like, but what are your metrics?
How can we keep these people motivated if they're just building and not yet having victories or achieving, if it's too early to achieve something? How would you do that?
Working to, it's got to be some like goal, but the goal itself is a vehicle through which to do movement building. So it's got to be some like actual goal, but it's not going to be. They're not going to be like churning through corporate targets anytime soon. But one of the but the thing is, one of the solution is you need to change. I don't know. You need smart funders who are like experienced strategists who understand complexity to make sure that these people aren't being screwed, but also. I don't know. I think most people in their countries who are working on strategies got a sense that they're working on smart things. I do think it's that many interactions with international organizations who are obsessed with just entirely optimizing for impact are making them feel insufficient. I don't know. This is just a sense. For a few conversations I've had since I got here, it's been it was quite a moving conversation. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking about it.
Okay. Olga? About
this. I mean, what transpired in this conversation now is pretty similar to what we hear when we talk to policymakers, and you ask them to, you try to lobby, let's say, for a particular change or reform, either going for fewer animals or going for better lives for the animals who are there, et cetera, et cetera. Well, and they use this argument a lot that we have very high standards, and if we actually do something more than what we have now, we're going to shift the production somewhere else in the world. And I know, I understand this, and they are right, that of course that's how business works, they're going to find opportunities somewhere else. But I think this should not prevent us from asking for what we can in the place, in the area where we live, because we're not going to get anywhere this way. Of course, we're trying to have a big, to look at the bigger picture, have more of a wholesome view of what we ask, make sure that what we ask can also negatively affect other countries or other regions of the world. But at the same time, we also need to understand that somewhere there needs to be change in order for change to happen elsewhere later on. But still, so in anyways, we hear these arguments a lot, and but they're used in a way to prevent us from actually moving on, from asking anything. So it's quite interesting to hear this.
It has to stop somewhere or start somewhere, right? Like we can have like one country that's like a shining example in abolishing something, and hopefully then other countries will follow. Wanted to ask you, so you interact with people in politics. Do you see where demands, communication styles, actions, interventions of other types of organizations could help you to be taken less seriously? Like maybe things that shine off badly on you that other people, other organizations are doing, and that makes it harder for you to interact with serious people like politicians?
Of course, I mean, you have examples like that, but you also need to understand that, I mean, at least from my perspective, I think everything is needed. I think you need to have these people who are able to enter the halls of power and talk to the people who make decisions. But you also need to have many other people who will scream and shout and use perhaps not, the same methods of approaching approaching their goals. So I don't think that we are hurt by these. Certainly the industry and the other side, the opposition, they're trying to make us seem as we are, we don't know what we're talking about, associate us with, other people that somehow they call extremists, etc. But I think we should not be fazed by these. because they'll try everything in their hands to do that. They'll use every tool they have. So I wouldn't want to discourage people. Of course, when we talk about violence, I mean that I draw the line there. But I wouldn't want to discourage people from using the tools that they have. But sometimes, at some point, there has to be some. It would be good to have some coordination at key points in time, but not. This is not to prevent other organizations from reaching their goals.
Yeah. Maybe Connor or Jaya, do you feel that there might be a tension, and are you hindered by potential, for instance, backlash from more abolitionist crowds in the animal movement?
No, I think we are aided by. So I think as much as you have, like on the spectrum, what the industry would think unreasonable makes welfare reform more reasonable. So I don't necessarily think that it's such a bad thing, because there might, if we were to imagine a universe where everybody is talking effective animal advocacy alone, that in itself is going to become the fringe of the movement. So I think there is definitely to keep that whole spectrum, so that when you go for a reasonable change, that reasonable change is actually seen as reasonable. But if you don't have anything that seems unreasonable, then what you're asking, which is reasonable, ends up being unreasonable. So in that sense, I feel it actually aids rather than hinders.
So you need the unreasonable people to look reasonable.
Correct.
One thing that comes to mind is I was happy the Animal Rising stopped focusing on RSPCA and is focusing on the worst farms. And this is, I'm not like super worried about it, but I think if I could change one thing, it would be for the more abolitionist groups to, if we could like coordinate in a way where they don't focus their efforts on the higher welfare farms. I don't think it makes any sense unless your goal is sort of vegan outreach, but we know it doesn't work very well. And the dream would be that, the sort of more hardline groups focus on exposing the worst farms, exposing the worst conditions, and groups like us can do the same, but also push for companies and governments to improve the standards. That seems like an ideal way of doing it, and you can talk about diet change when you're exposing the worst conditions. It doesn't seem logical to me to do that whilst targeting the best ones. Yeah.
You want to respond to that, Ben?
And I've got no thoughts on the matter, just nodding along.
Why did you stop? Why did Animal Rising stop focusing on the RSPCA?
So, just in case anyone's confused by this question, we ran a campaign last year targeting the world's biggest charity, the RSPCA, who has a certification scheme. And we learned a hell of a lot from it. It wasn't perfect, and it's built into what we're doing now. So that was because there's an element, they should disassociate from the scheme. You've got the world's most trusted animal brand, promoting meat products, but I mean, honestly, I just don't care about it that much anymore. We've all moved on. We followed an OODA loop. We did it. We learned. We processed it, and we went for round 2 with a new strategy. So, and we did reconciliation. And actually, I would just say, we beheaded the whole organization by accident. So the CEO, the head of policy, the president, all the vice presidents, they all left, and then we had no one to speak to anymore. And then, but the head of policy, Emila Sawinski, she's a vegan, and it was quite an intense conflict. But we're now very good friends and speak all the time. And hopefully at VARC we'll be having the UK conference next year. We'll be having a panel or something together and making up. Well, I need to put in an application if Liz is here, who runs VARC. But anyway, we've made up. The point is transformative conflict. We've had a fight. We drew all of the animal movement into it. We've all learned a lot. We've made up, and we're moving forward stronger. So that was the whole point of it.
Not sure if we're stronger. Like from like a movement point of view, I would say it's good to like have productive like disagreements and stuff, but there have been like companies that I've talked to who have basically hesitated about moving to RSPCA assured because of the campaign, right? So that's like a company being discouraged from improving conditions. And I totally agree that there's many problems with RSPCA assured. It's quite complicated, but I think it's like it could have been a lot worse as well. Like I think we could have had a lot more, like we could have had companies sort of stop selling RSPCA assured products, and I think that would have been worse for animals. Like that would have led to more animal suffering, right? And again, me and Ben are friends, and we talk a lot about this. But I think it's not obviously good.
Right. Yeah. And again, without getting to specifics, I feel standards come in all form and size. And what we approach is a standards benchmark approach, because standards have two aspects to it. The standard itself, and anybody could write. You go to ChatGPT and you give it an animal welfare scheme, anything, anybody can write a standard, no big deal. I think the issue really comes with standards administration, and even the best of the standards can fail when it comes to standards administration. But then the issue really is that there are a ton of industry-led, industry-driven standards where there is really no scope for improvement at all. And what happens is that when you attack of the schemes that exist, possibly the most credible one, then you end up putting the credible one at the same line of the schemes that are like really, really bad. And then industry will then default to something lower because you've not given them a reason to default to something lower. So I do think that while I understand the reason and the fact that maybe there's no proper audit and also like there could just be like so many things that can just go wrong at a farm, even when it's high welfare. Like we don't understand, like for example, even with the best of the intentions of the farmer, there can be a feather pecking outbreak. There's nothing you can do about it. There can be a vent pecking outbreak. There's really nothing you can do about it. The fact is that cage-free farms are still factory farms, and it comes with all the problems that come with a factory farm. So I feel like if you end up attacking those, then you create legitimacy to standards who don't meet the benchmark. So that would be my 2 cents on that.
Just one quick thing to add. I was talking earlier about like it's for most of us, things are so abstracted. It's hard to see that you're making like a wrong decision, let's say. And by that I mean like a decision that leads to less suffering being reduced, or like we're in a worse place than we were before. It's hard to see that because we can't see the counterfactual. And this is sort of also a reason, I think, to use our resources basically on like the worst players rather than let's call it like the best players. Like we, the campaign could have had, the RSPCA campaign can have many benefits to it. But what if Animal Rising instead had sort of campaigned for like banning cages, for example? Instead using all those years of resources, you could counterfactually achieve something else, right? By focusing on something that was sort of not the thing that we're trying to push companies towards, right?
So I understand that. So the reasoning of like not attacking the RSPCA, like you've set out, Jaya, but is there also a risk that we are asking for too little and that we are like getting satisfied with like, I mean, we're working incrementally, but that the increments are like really small and that we're not making as much progress as we owe the animals?
Right. I think animal welfare science is evolving, and there's all trait, especially with like development of AGI, AI, that there is a sense that it's probably going to get worse, just the way we looking at the history. But I do feel like the only way we are going to achieve anything is with a benchmark approach. We as a movement come together and say, well, this is what the animal welfare sciences evolved. Like, okay, beak trimming. Are we able to do infrared beak trimming? Is there a way in which we're able to knock out the gene in the layer bird that actually triggers cannibalism? So like some of those. So sadly, again, to drive back, from a farmer's point of view, unless there's a legislation to ban cages, their default is to put the bird in a cage. And there's a reason why they put the bird in a cage. It's easy to manage disease control. It's easy to collect eggs. There are no floor eggs. Now, suddenly we're asking this farmer to say, drop everything, go cage-free. And in this exercise, there's a company, there's an animal welfare group, and there's a farmer. Company does not meet animal welfare commitment. At worst, they have Chris and her team come and scream at them. At worst, right? Then there is us. We'll continue to apply to Open Full. We'll get another years of grant, and we'll continue what we are doing. The person who really loses is the farmer, who actually put their neck out, took a mortgage, and was the first mover or whatever mover to say, all right, I'm not going to follow the status quo. I'm going to go have a cage-free farm. And the minute you do that, there is just a huge variety of problems. You suddenly realize that, oh my God, there's a reason why I put these birds in cages. Like, it's a nightmare to manage them. It's like they're like disease outbreak, there's feather pecking, there's floor eggs, there's eggs, like feed is being wasted, there's mycotoxin built up in the litter. And then we say, well, that's not enough. And we penalize the farmers who put their neck out to do the right thing. And to me, it seems like we are better off keeping the stick to the companies who continue to source cages, rather than saying that people are doing the right thing. That isn't enough, so let's just whip the hell out of you, than like providing them carrots to improve their welfare, because what they're doing is incremental, and whether we like it or not, welfare is incremental and welfare science is incremental.
I love incremental change. Everyone loves incremental change. But the question is also whether or not we're building also transformative change strategies as well. So that's all good. But the question is, which is at the core, I think, of the difference, is there is a group of people who there's an inherent leadership. Okay, I'll start again. Leadership is about two things. It's about, one is a cold-hearted analysis of the facts, tick, EA. And number two is believing that large-scale change is possible, communicating that, and getting people around you to believe it too. And there's this. It is not, is large-scale change possible or not? That's the wrong question. Because if enough people believe something is possible, it becomes possible. So what you believe about the world influences it, and particularly when you're dealing with large groups of people. So I would just, and that's what the social movement organizing model is. So sometimes people say there's a naivety in it, but I just choose to believe that large-scale change is possible. And I seem to wander around just getting other people to believe it too. So, and the machine's starting to get running. So, I just want to reinforce this point, because I think there's a sort of like, there's a slightly like metaphysical point here. If you get enough people to believe something, it does start to become true.
Right. I think the real test for that, though, as in getting people into reality distortion, is a good thing. But finally, reality distortion has to meet your profit and loss statement. Right? Like Steve Jobs was known for a reality distortion. Like he said, like, let's just do it. Like his whole life goal. But if his reality distortion didn't meet Apple's profit and loss statement, he would just be a lunatic who's drawing figures on the streets. Like that's basically who he would be. So finally, transformative change, incremental change, whatever that we want to, the true and the only test is profit and loss statement. And if it doesn't make sense, it's not going to work. And I think that's where it all boils down to.
Number one is a cold-hearted analysis of the facts. Number two is communicating that change is possible. Yeah, one without the other. We've definitely done number two, just number two at times, until you got like 200 people literally driving off a cliff into prison. So so you do have to be careful with that one. Yeah, but number one. Now, at least we're getting better at number one. I invite you to get better at number two.
Yeah, I was going to say I think it's not true that like you get enough people to believe something, it will happen. Like because we are trying to influence the industry, right? So like we could there are many empirical examples now of us believing we can do things, and then lots of people believe it and try really hard for many years, and it doesn't work, right? Like for example, for your signaling, sorry. So yeah, the movement moved from cage-free campaigns to broiler welfare campaigns, for example. We were very successful with cage-free, got thousands of commitments, and then there was a lot of complacency and arrogance and confidence, I think, that this was going to be easy when we move on to the European chicken commitment. And now we're seeing, despite all the resources we put onto it, we were very wrong. It was very difficult. And there are many, many reasons for that, lots of strategic reasons we could go into. But the point is that I think, going back to your question, I would say the opposite, that we are way too naively ambitious. The one thing I would want people to do is to be a lot more grounded in sort of what we can actually achieve. It just seems that we have a terrible track record in terms of like doing what we like, predicting what we can actually achieve. We seem to overreach. There's definitely value in having high like moonshots, right? Like we want to aim high, but we don't want to aim so ridiculously high that we fall completely flat of what we're trying to achieve. Yeah. And doing that doesn't mean that we have to be all depressed, right? It can be just like being a bit more rigorous and realistic about and responding to the world. Like you do cage-free campaigns, do broiler campaigns, and you find more information about how the world works and then how good we are and how powerful we are, and you adjust accordingly, and you just make your expectations a bit more realistic, and you can rally everybody around that. You can okay, we've thought about it. We think that we're going to lower what we're going to ask for, and then you can do the number two thing that Ben mentioned of the productive delusion.
Olga, on that point, is your assessment, like when talking to the people in Brussels, is your assessment that we are having the right degree of realism in our asks in general, or are they too unrealistic, or could we ask more?
Well, it depends on the particular period when you're asking for more. Yes, we are going now. I mean, we're at perhaps the lowest point in terms of the policy sphere and the policy asks, because we had for a number of years we went through. We were quite high in terms of ambition. Perhaps we should have strategized more about what should be the immediate ask and something that, to unite people around, rather than embark on a, but we were, in a way, we were drawn in because we thought that we had the ability and the time was right to actually embark on a full revision of the legislation regarding farmed animals. So we were encouraged by the signs. It was the institutions themselves that actually pushed us to hope and to have ambition. But as it usually happens, sometimes you ask too much, but also there are many other external events that in a way change the situation, and soon enough you're back to where you started. So we are now at a point where we need to think very carefully and very strategically about what we ask and what is achievable. That doesn't mean that we lose hope, but we just need to be very smart in how we play the game, because it is all about a game. Politics is a game, okay? So, and you have ups and downs. The change that you can bring about, though, is I wouldn't say everlasting, but it's lasting. I wouldn't, again, with companies, I mean, I respect the work, and it's very important, and it helps us when we try to push policymakers. It helps us if companies have shifted. But at the same time, I also see many examples where companies take back commitments or not fulfill their commitments, or they use us to kind of, greenwash everything they do. So we need to be very careful. I think in general, as activists, we need to be smarter, and we need to question more the people we talk to.
Maybe Connor, in light of the changed political landscape, have you or has Anima changed any strategies, tactics, communication styles?
Based on the political?
Yeah, mainly regarding the shift to the right that we've seen in the last few years.
Not sure. Like, I mean, for example, in Poland, we've had right-wing government for a while, I think. So that's something we've been, it's been part of the work for a while. I could say that in the UK, we now have left-wing government, and I don't see that much has changed based on that. I'm generally very skeptical of political advocacy for animals, especially in the UK, but I guess it depends. I'm from the UK, that's the context I know. It's very difficult to achieve things politically for animals in the UK. Might be different in other countries, but it just seems like generally corporate campaigns are the way to go. So that's why we work on those mostly.
Right. More generally for all of you, has your organization like strategically shifted just in general you can take whatever period that you want, any major strategic approach changes that you've gone through? Like Ben, you already said the RSPCA, you started that and then gave it up. Have there been other insights or learnings where you said like, okay, we have to radically change our approach? Anybody?
We've honestly we restructure almost every 9 months. We're like following such quick. I don't think so we just like do it all the time. That is our strategy. How quickly how can we optimize for how quickly we can do something, restructure the whole organization and go again. And I think we follow a quicker ODA loop than I think any other organization I'm aware of. We can do it in less than a year. So, I mean, that's a strategy in itself. I would just say, reinforcing that is inherent to our strategy, is the ability to just do something, learn, restructure, go again. So a slight meta answer to your point, but yeah, constantly, that is inherent to who we are.
There's no problem in giving up too quickly, like with a certain approach or campaign?
I think now, this is what I'd say we were following a doom loop for the last 5 years of doing something, another big plan, you do it again, it's like hundreds of arrests, and eventually you run out of steam. But now we have stabilizing, certainly. We are stabilizing now. But certainly at the beginning life of an organ, maybe we just needed that in our genesis of just because we're not really copying a model from any other organization. We built our own ecosystem. Everyone comes through our own system. So maybe we just needed that to be able to learn and create our own strategy and stuff like that. So now we have stabilized because we're now going into what you call a flywheel. We're starting to move faster. We've locked it in now, and now we're starting to go faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. But yeah, so that's what's gonna. Well, but I often say these sorts of things, so we're gonna find out. I was probably saying something similar. I was here last year, probably saying something similar, but this time it's for real.
And you said RSPCA was going to drop their scheme, if I recall correctly.
Right, good to hear you're stable. Olga?
Yeah, just wanted to say that maybe I said this before, but we went from the highs to the lows. So we went from high ambition to going for the lowest common denominator because we have to. I mean, we cannot gain anything else if we use that approach that we used some time ago. So now we're going to try to secure at least what we have and not lose more. I think this is basically the mentality. This is what is in our minds now.
And hope that times will get better and more conducive to change. Yes. We're going to turn to your very intelligent questions right now. Some of them we may have already had, so I'm going to skip a little bit for now. So question by Molik. To measure how many animals are kept out of farms, what variables are taken into account? The general number of farmed animals is increasing and there needs to be a good model to this just shifted. There needs to be a good model to compare how many farmed animals would increase without the work an organization does versus how many have increased with the work. So it's about the counterfactual, what would have happened without you. Anybody have an idea of how to measure that?
I would just say you're looking for an answer which doesn't exist. There is going to be no simple answer to that. It's just complexity, and this is got to accept that.
Okay, sorry.
There are ways to look at it, but a straight answer, as simple as welfare improvements, that is just like this. That's the Yeah, I think there's a lot of people desiring, and I think that's what pulls people to some of these things, desiring this level of simplicity and straight answers. But life is more complicated than that, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I could think of a way to do that.
No.
In a sense, like you could, but you could say, well, because of our work, we got these many cage-free eggs sold and these many birds out of cages, but then there are like new cage farms being set up. Broadly, our sense is economy wins. Like that's basically all. Finally, that's all it all boils down to. And there's nothing you can do to beat the curve. Like if there is a demand curve that's increasing, there's very, very, very little anybody can do to beat the curve. You could like maybe short it a bit, but it's going to come back again. So we believe that we have to ride the curve rather than beat the curve or push the curve. That's where we kind of come in. So it's really hard to say, quantify exactly.
Okay.
And I already said before that it's not possible.
Nobody
to-
believes in that answer. All right. This is a question for Ben. So after the time that went by, how do you assess the decision to start the RSPCA campaign? Was it a good idea to start it in the first place?
The only bad mistake, I wouldn't even say, to be honest, the impacts, was it a good decision? Yeah. So I don't want to make this a talk about the RSPCA campaign, but I'm just giving one example. The biggest food company in the UK, they did decide not to invest in RSPCA, and they decided instead to invest in plant-based. So that's just like one data point. So it had lots of complex. So when you try and break a complex system, there's a huge number of outcomes, and it can be probabilistic. But then obviously when the real world happens, you could have like 10 negative ones, 15 positive ones. There were like thousands of complex effects. So it was a massive no. It was. Yeah, I mean, within the campaign itself, we made mistakes. We didn't play fair. We went to their branches. We to their like 100 of their like charity shop branches. Some people like posted this. It was we didn't control. We didn't realize that once you start something, we could hold the non-violence respect in us. But when you unleash like 500 like crazy animal rights people from across the country, you've got like nothing to do with. They're not going to play fair. And also that we realized that ask, which we should have been disassociate from the scheme, not drop the scheme. So within the campaign itself, there were mistakes. But no, our intuition that we were going to the heart of the conflict, I think was the correct intuition. But we just made some misjudgments, which was just linked to some of our internal things at the time. So no. So in short answer, no. It was a good. I'm glad we did it. I think it had. As said from so heard internally, it got way easier for them to implement, make changes to the assured scheme. So they were able to make changes that they weren't otherwise. So I would say there were like a huge number of complex effects, but could we have done it way better? I mean, I am sad at the missed opportunity of had we done some of these things differently, it could have transformed the RSPCA. So I don't know. Yeah. So no, I don't regret it, but there are some things which I have regretted and learnt from.
Can I ask a question? I'm wondering, like, what would have had to happen for you to think that it was a bad decision? Because I guess one of the problems I see with animalizing this approach, it's like it's really hard to hold you to account, right? It's like it's very intuitive based, and like you're kind of focusing on things that can't be measured, and like the downside of that is like, how do we know if you're like making bad decisions, right?
I think it looks to you that things are harder to measure, I think, than they actually are, because we're focused on, we just accept there are just so many different data points that we're picking up, and the end result is anyone who comes and spends time in our office can feel there's something going on. And that's because of the conditions and environment we've created. People have learned hard lessons. People are totally like battle hardened. And that has been like one thing after another. So the question is, are we going to be more? Our goal is to be 100 times. We're playing to win. So we aim to be 100 times the animal movement stronger today. I don't know when it will be, but that's kind of those are the calculations we're making. We're wondering what does it take is the process, what are the conflicts that have to happen for us to get to where we are now to be 100 times stronger. So that's the calculation we're making. And within that, there are always going to be mistakes, because I've heard you say already the mistake avoidance. But if you're going to do big things, there are going to be big mistakes. And I literally don't even, people always tell me off for not like looking bad enough for long enough once we've made a mistake. But as you just learn, go again.
Yeah, I'm totally on board. Like, mistakes is like incredibly, it's crucial, because what we're doing is like making it up as we go along. It's like an exploratory movement, right? So like we're trying things out, and we have to take risks. I don't think it's about like making mistakes. It's more like how do you make sure that you're making the best possible decisions if it's you're basing so much on like how things just feel, right? Like there's so many examples throughout history where like that led to terrible things, right?
That is not what obviously we're doing. We all read. We have a read. Like I don't think like social movement organizing is just so unbelievably complex. It's the original challenge. Like anyone who's cracked it in history, like the Russian Revolution, they cracked it. Boom! They built a model that could suck in millions of people, combined with the right timing. They've been building up to that for years. Extinction Rebellion did the same. It's the ultimate challenge. So we like have a very disciplined reading culture. People are constantly reading books, but we're dealing with complexity.
All right.
Yeah, that's just the point.
I'm gonna go to the next question, which is maybe more of a comment. I think it's mostly for Connor. I think from Excel. I think the European chicken commitment actually means less animals are being born. For instance, after switching to the ECC compliant production, Norway's Norsk killing, 30% of the country's retail market, says it produced the same amount of meat as when it was using the Ross 308 breed, despite raising 22% fewer birds each year. So that's thanks to lower mortality, more edible meat per bird, less meat defects, and the ability to grow them to a heavier weight.
Unfortunately, that's the exception. That's Norway, and Norskilling is sort of very unusual company that was mentioned there. Norway is probably the most expensive country in terms of chicken meat, and in general, like very expensive countries, very high standards. Norskilling was very early on the European chicken commitment, has gone all in on it, and it's made it its whole thing. They spend tons of resources and time trying to make their production more efficient, and in most cases, it doesn't happen that way. They're not so they're not going so much all in on the ECC and trying to be the most efficient, environmentally friendly and high welfare company. They're optimizing for selling chicken meat, right? So it seems that in most cases it is more animals.
Okay. This is for everybody. Hypothetically, do you think it'd be better for the whole animal movement to agree on one strategy and coordinate around it, even using different tactics, or to be more chaotic and disagreeable maybe, but maybe cover more ground this way? So diversity versus uniformity.
I was going to say, one goal with many strategies would be a much better approach, but yeah, one order higher, but yeah.
Okay.
I just don't think it can ever happen. So I mean, I wouldn't even go into it because I don't think it's possible. We're talking about humans here around the world.
About vegans, yeah.
So the question is about, is it better to align on the same goal?
Yes. Would it be better?
Same strategy.
Yeah.
I guess it depends what we mean by strategy. For sure, it's hard, but I think we could do a lot better. Good strategy requires sort of focus and optimizing for as much as you can, having different things optimizing for the same thing. Then the impact is sort of greater than the parts, because we're not sort of working against each other, which we sometimes do. If we can pool resources trying to achieve the same kind of things, and I think that's likely to lead to better outcomes. And I think it's not all or nothing. We're trying to do this at the moment in the UK. There's quite a lot of groups working on lots of different things, and I think we are definitely going to be able to increase the amount of coordination, even if it's not fully solved.
All right. Question for Olga. How come the EU is aware of end the cage age and national welfare legislations, but at the same time makes trade agreements that override animal welfare, thus undermining EU farmers?
Because we're talking about different policies here and different people and different DGs. You have competing, let's say, goals within the EU institutions. I think trade is out of the picture. You have specific departments, so-called director generals, that are have a particular vision and work on certain issues. But in a way, trade overrides everything. They call the shots in everything that has to do in relations with third countries. So they're not necessarily all coordinated. So it's not just us, it's not just the movement, it's also many times the policymakers themselves. So in regards to trade, I was talking to some people earlier about this. It's quite complicated. Let's try to see what can happen within Europe, and then try to see what we can do in our trade agreements with our countries.
Okay, 5 minutes left. We have a controversial question here from Martin Balluch. If reducing suffering overall is your only goal, would you let a few unconnected animals suffer to reduce suffering of the many? Like test remedies of an illness for chickens on some chickens. If you say yes, would you do that with humans too? Test on a few humans to help many. Contrary to human rights, which means you are not in favor of animal rights then. True?
It was a very complicated argument.
So it's basically, we had to have some abolitionist pushback here.
Yeah,
all this welfareism.
I don't know. I think it's like, I think if you're a hardcore utilitarian, you have to allow for some short-term dips, I suppose, in suffering. But I think you can also, I don't think we should be naively just slaves to numbers. Like we should, also use common sense principles, about treating each other kindly, and you could imagine some very cold calculation where it's better for animals that we are horrible to people or something. And I think there should be certain things that we certain principles like that we don't step over, even if it sort of seems like it might be better in the utilitarian calculation or something. I think it would just be sort of what is the way, depending on what situation we're talking about, with whatever campaign it is, whatever the intervention is, and there wouldn't be a general answer for it.
Yeah. Anybody else? Just picked out this question because it does show that we're not all aligned on these things, and there is a big part of the movement that's not represented here that would push back against these strategies. I'm gonna come close to the finish line. Just as a last thing, everybody, how can we collectively move closer to strategic alignment within animal advocacy? Maybe also regarding that last question, how do we create a unifying story or unifying approach so that we can collaborate as much as we can?
Just very short, I think, statement, basically that complementarity, I think, works in our case. We should see each other as complementing each other, not necessarily fighting against one another. There are different approaches. A lot of times my approach may not work and yours may, but in other periods, other times, the opposite can happen. Mm-hmm. So I think each one of us has, positive elements and, to bring into the movement. And I personally try to look for others to complement what I do. I think that would be, and also, maybe perhaps use of resources a lot of times also helps. But anyways, I don't want to take up the conversation.
All right. We need short answers from now
Beautiful. I actually think just getting more women in senior leadership roles would go quite a long way. For me, it's like an I wasn't just doing it for the claps. But I've just noticed now. I've literally got no ideology in my private life. Of course, yeah, obviously feminist ideas. But having been running an organization, without like the percentage of men who are going to be like bullshitting is like way higher than on average than the number of women. And then also it's much more collaborative and relational. So I just think as an organization leaders, you're like optimizing for like innovation, collaboration, bringing a lot of people around. Basically movement building. I've just realized to get more movement building happening, you need more women in senior leadership roles. So yeah.
Okay. Jerry?
Sure. I think there needs to be equity of opportunities, and I think like that doesn't exist within the movement at this particular point of time. And I'm guilty as well. Like there happen to be few people who have access to funders, few people who can go online, fill up the complex forms, do the theory of change, and get those fundings. There are many who don't. Many who have like a imposter syndrome just to even like apply for a grant, even though you might say, oh, well, Animal Welfare Fund provides all sorts of grant. Anybody can apply and you get it. But then it also takes a lot of courage for someone to actually go create an account and apply. So I do think that our movement has been looking at Global South, almost like how traditional aid agencies have looked at Global South, is to say, hell, we have an approach. Why don't we take this particular approach? Go down. I think one classic example is the plant-based movement. Like, oh, well, we've now been able to crack that, you get like ground beef and chicken nuggets, and like we've now solved this. Why don't we take this to India? But like nobody really eats ground beef and chicken nuggets. So yeah, what are you really solving for? Or like hedging on things based on one's own personal beliefs because you happen to be a donor. So I do believe like there might not be a need for a central planning, and nowhere in history there's an empirical evidence that shows that central planning for a movement really works. It's probably been counterproductive. But I do think that there is a lack of equity. Like AVA in India costs like hundreds of dollars to attend. Most people cannot. Again, not being hypocritical, but it's just the fact is that there isn't equity within the movement to address the Global South or developing world. And I feel like the more equitable opportunities we create innovation, and people can solve for X within their own region, rather than to say, well, we've solved for you, why don't you go and implement it? I'd be like, that's what's needed.
Yeah, maybe just say something that hasn't been said. Maybe the most foundational thing we could do is what Josh said this morning, is build friendships. I've had this advice from many US activists, and they seem to have pretty good sort of sense of coordination and coalition and working together. And this is basically apparently the main advice. And I can say, for example, with Ben and Rose from Animal Rising, like a couple of years ago, we didn't know each other. And James Osden from the Shrimp Podcast organized this retreat with leaders in the UK, and that was the first time many groups had met Ben and Rose, and it was incredibly productive, and we started friendships. We're a social species, so I think it's very hard to talk about any of these things if we don't have some basic feeling of camaraderie and friendship. That would be probably the one most important thing I think we should do.
All right, thank you. So complementarity, more women, equity.
On the and yeah, so that's Rose, my co-director on the subject. So you can come and speak to either of us as well.
There's Rose.
With the same person.
So, as I was saying, complementarity, more women, equity, friendships, and I would trust that we're all on the same team, wanting the same thing. Thank you all very much for the great work that you're doing.